The Strongest Man on Earth was held this weekend, and we got some controversy to cover. Now, this show has exploded in the last couple years as Brian Shaw tried to make himself a big name in strongman promotion to push the sport forward, and he's got the biggest names. Now he has a stadium and this overbuilt equipment and prize money, and it looks like things are moving forward. But then there's a sea of controversy. I'm going to talk about my biggest what the fuck moment, but I want to make sure that this isn't just a roast, because there is a ton to applaud Brian Shaw for with these events. He filled a stadium to look like a Giants live event in the UK, created an immense buzz. He's got cool looking events. He's bringing the best names. This stands to be something that can actually get strongman to evolve and bring in a bigger talent pool. However, it's important to keep in mind also that this isn't a charity. Shaw isn't doing mission work. Strongman is not a religion. This is a business. They're engaged in promoting sports, spectator sports. It's lucrative if you know what you're doing, and it should be, because making strongman lucrative is the only way the sport grows. The problem with all the other attempts in the past to make the next big thing was always just a complete lack of business acumen. Nobody really had a concept of how they were supposed to make money. And you have all these horror stories of big shows coming around, athletes not getting paid, promoters like going into debt, deals going bad, and you had these models that were unsustainable. So anyways, Brian finding a way to make money is him moving the sport forward, and I really do applaud him for that. Now on to the controversy. That is, if any of you have been following, obviously the squatting event, this is where the contest turned. We started with day one, Thor winning 3 of the 4 events, but because he had a bad showing in the overhead and Hooper did well, Hooper was still ahead by a small margin. So we go into one of Thor's best events, which is squatting, and there was a very surprising, even disastrous showing. Now I'll say that Hooper is a damn strong squatter, obviously, but Thor's just better. Here's Hooper with an 800 by 5 in wraps. That is a world-class feat. That is an insane squatting performance, but you see him move through and hit the last one, which looked to be about the last good rep he had in him. Then you have Thor with his 835, pausing the first few reps, being very controlled, and leaving some in the tank. So if you take that 15 kilo, 35 pound differential, with Thor having a few extra reps, being more controlled, you're probably looking at an 80 to 100 pound difference in performance, which tracks because Thor is a bona fide 1,000-pound squatter. So when I was following the results in the Discord thread, Bromley HQ Discord, link below, I saw everybody was zeroing, and I thought, yeah, these guys just aren't used to squatting heavy weights outside of a suit. If you have something on the order of 700 pounds for reps, a lot of these guys stuffing into a triple ply squat suit, that's actually not as daunting as you would think, but 800 raw, that is an entirely different ball game. So when I saw Bobby only got 4, I saw a couple singles, and then Mitch comes in and gets 10 goddamn reps. I thought, holy hell, A, this must show just how bad everybody else is at squatting, and B, Thor's going to get like 15 fucking reps. Then I saw Thor got 3, behind Mitch, behind Bobby, behind Hatton. What in God's name is going on? Then the screenshots started flooding in, and we got to see what the bottom position was like in these squats. This doesn't make any sense. Even in the past, when they've had the barrels to the boxes at like World's Strongest Man, they might be a little high, but nothing like this. This is egregious. And then we saw this screenshot, which showed the athletes being measured with a protractor because the bottom position was set for each athlete according to their knee angle being at 90 degrees. What in the Joel Seedman is going on in this sport? Now, one of my eternal gripes with strongman is that people insist on getting clever with events. It's the same problem CrossFit has had in the past, where you technically can do anything and there's nothing preventing you from getting more creative than your creativity should allow. And people take things to ridiculous degrees, and then you're left asking, what the fuck are we supposed to be measuring here? Now, sometimes you get something new and cool, but most of the time it's a clusterfuck. No one's on the same page, and the winner gets decided out of the chaos of mass confusion from the other competitors, rather than actually being a better, smarter, or more prepared athlete performing in a discipline that everybody had a handle on. The height of sport is reached when everybody knows what the game is and everybody has had the opportunity to push themselves to get it. People like the gamer mode, be ready for anything type of shit, but it really brings into question what it is you're actually testing the day of. And for those who are interested in finding who the world's strongest man is, that puts a big asterisk next to that title. But of course, that's just like my opinion and stuff. Now, the problem here isn't with the squat apparatus. It's the decision to do a 90-degree angle. I can't even say it with a straight face. Standardizing squats is tricky as is. No one struggles with deadlifts, overhead presses, or benches because they start from fixed landmarks, the ground or your chest. and they finish in easily recognizable positions, which is lockout. The squat has to start at a position that is very hard to measure, very hard to standardize, and is very hard to recognize for each person. That's why powerlifting has 3 judges, and why there's still contention over the many deep squats that have been red lighted and the many high squats that have been credited with world records. It's why strongman also decided long ago to say fuck this and just give stops for athletes to hit the apparatus on. Now that worked pretty well, but it still brings up its own can of worms. Anytime you have a set stop beforehand, there's a difference between the measurement that you take and what the athlete actually does in contest. So with this whole 90-degree setup, you had the opportunity for lifters to get measured one way. They would set their feet, get their knees to 90 degrees, but then they could potentially change their hip position on the way down. So if your hips ride back a little bit more, the knee is open beyond 90 degrees, which is mechanically just a stupidly strong position. Now, I'm not even knocking that specifically because it's a hole in the event. That's on the promoters. As a competitor, it's up to you to recognize what you can get away with because everybody else is doing the same thing. There's no gentleman's agreement. The rule in strongman has always been if it's not specifically disallowed by the rules, it flies. And people will push those limits. You expect them to. I've actually used this strategy on an event because your goal there is to place as high as possible relative to all the other people who have the ability to do the exact same thing. Now, that doesn't mean I think this embodies the spirit of the sport. This is still very unsatisfying. I've left events where I've had to do things to pull ahead where I wish that it was addressed beforehand because it's not interesting to me to figure out how to game equipment, try to constantly outsmart the promoters and the other athletes. At some point, you do just want a good old-fashioned test of physical ability. So we have a pretty good model for squatting, which is to get to parallel, crease of the hip below the knee. It's still contentious. It's still hard to do, but then they decided to go above parallel with this bullshit 90-degree measurement. And the thing is, you're just adding so much uncertainty. If there's some marginal difference, an inch or two right around parallel, there is a huge difference where you're an inch or two halfway up on a squat. And what that guarantees is that no matter how clever you think you are, you're having everybody essentially do a different lift. And we saw that. You can look at the guys that did well. You could look at Hatton. You could look at Bobby. You could look at Mitch. So the question is, what were we supposed to be testing here? The athlete's ability just to recognize that they could do something different than the tests that they were given. So this triggered me because in my opinion, this event should have been a banger. It should have been another staple event that we bring in that forces strongmen to be good squatters. And it ended up getting turned into kind of like a heavy yoke pick for reps for a lot of guys. I think it was a clusterfuck. I don't think it was a good look. And even if you can justify a partial squat execution, you have to be aware of on a higher level what's going to attract people or push them away. When you're trying to bring spectators in, you don't want to trigger anything that makes them raise an eyebrow. And the things that they raise an eyebrow to are when something that they relate to becomes completely unrelatable. Multiply lifting had that problem because people that bench, which is everybody and their grandma, can't relate to an equipped bench press. It's unrecognizable to them. And people are also very sensitive to when there is something that is obviously unfair or different between competitors. So when they see two people that are obviously going through different ranges of motion, obviously executing different lifts, where it looks like the guy that did the best is being held to a different standard, whether or not he is, that's something that tends to push people away.
Feeling about your squat result, Mitch? A little bit of a, I mean, name a more iconic duo than Mitch Hooper and a controversial event result. Oh man.
I don't know. I think the thing that people have to understand is like, I'm not doing anything intentionally at all. And all I could do is get to the bottom, you know? So we tested at 120 kilos.
Do you think maybe that was a blunder, not having it anywhere close to competition weight?
Well, not really, because you can't really the day before comp. You can't go towards competition
that's the problem, yeah.
You know, I think it's one of the things. Anytime it's a new apparatus, it's strongman. It's like you've got your set of rules.
Yeah.
You use them as best you can, and that's what I did. And to be fair, you know, let's say I was set lower, you know, 2 inches lower. I'm from 10 to 7 and still won the event. It's not like it was a close margin or anything.
Yeah.
And also, I think a lot of guys were like tempo squatting, searching for the bottom. Yeah. And I was just confident from the get-go.
Yeah.
I also back myself as the best squatter. I don't think that results in an anomaly. So anyway, it happens every time I do well.
Now, Mitch had the exact right attitude to this. His job isn't to satisfy Reddit's need for deep squats. His job is to rack up as many points as possible, given the confines of the rules. Now, I've been in enough shows, I know that sometimes the rules get loony, and you can either get on your soapbox and say, I'm not doing this because I have standards. And then you can hold your honor and virtue as a consolation prize after the show's over when you're looking from across the arena at the people that actually made it on the podium. I don't expect Mitch or anybody else to disadvantage themselves unnecessarily. This is just the promoters incorporating a weird rule, and I think it led to a very unsatisfactory outcome for many of the people watching. Now, it's not as if this event cost Thor this title. Even if he won this event, it only would have afforded him a few points, and Mitch finished with quite a big lead.
So we're hoping that Mitch zeroes on one of the events. I'm not sure which one that'll be.
I think I overheard a talk they were having in their hotel room. I had my ear to the door. And they said, we lost to the Arnold by 16. We're going to try to lose by 15 or less this time.
Was that what it was, 16? Something like that. Yeah.
He made this joke calling back to the Arnold, and I thought it was funny to see kind of a cocky asshole side. I feel like there should be a lot more of this. And you get a sense that a lot of people are smiling in front of the camera. But when the camera's off, I'm not sure everybody is in such good spirits. Thor still has a weakness in the overhead he has to fix if he wants to be able to take on Mitch, who is just stupidly well-rounded. But at the same time, Thor won 5 out of 8 events outright. That is monumental. So he's finding himself in the same position Kilshkowski was in at the Arnold for so many years, where he would dominate all the events and then place poorly in the deadlift, ultimately costing him what people thought would be an otherwise easy win. And this shows a fatal flaw in the point system too, because how you place relative to somebody else is dependent on everybody else at the show as well. And as you add or remove competitors, your placing relative to any one other person can change. This happens at OSG every year when they have the heats, and then they try to retain those athlete placings going into the finals. The problem is when you remove all the people that aren't in the finals, you have people switch placings, which you don't like to see that. You would like to see some objective, concrete way to rank people. It's a little unsatisfying knowing that if it was just Mitch and Thor, Mitch would win, but when you add in a bunch of other people, how they place in between them determines the outcome. But that's a sport, and that's how it's always been, and as of right now, I don't have a better alternative, and you probably don't either, so it is what it is. Now, like I said, this shouldn't outshine all of the positives of the show. Even if there were missteps, I heard people talking about inconsistent judging. There were some rules that were kind of weird that I had never heard before, which seems like they're just trying to reinvent the wheel and create more confusion. However, I heard from people that were there that it was a blast to watch live. It looked unlike any event I've ever seen in the United States. And the effort put into the equipment is obvious. It's much needed for the sport. So even if the kinks are still being worked out, every year this show goes off, I think it's still a win. And I think the buzz around it is guaranteed to lead to bigger events, get more people to put their toe in the strongman promotion waters. And hopefully that increase in attention means more prize money, more opportunities, more talent. And that's inevitably going to give us more boxing matches over 1 kilogram world record breakers. So hats off to Mitch Hooper. Amazing performance, and he did exactly what he needed to do to secure his win, which is his job. I don't fault the guy in the least. However, I've said this in the past, I'm saying it now. Thor has the potential to be the true greatest of all time because his strength paired with his height and his well-roundedness is unlike anything we've ever seen ever. He deadlifts and squats more than Zydrunas ever did, and he's like 5 inches taller, and he's fast, and he's conditioned, and he's well-rounded. The numbers he can move, the package he brings. I want to see a fully rounded out half Thor Bjornsson. We'll see if we ever get that, because that would be something that I think would be unstoppable. And that battle between a prime Mitch and a prime Thor, I think would be one for the ages. So that's all I got for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.